Hi, I'm Dave Vickers and welcome to the Photo Show. With spring approaching, we're starting to get into the wedding season time of year. So I thought what I'd do today is share a few tips and tricks that I use when I'm photographing weddings to help the day run as smoothly as possible. Now, whether you photographed a wedding before or whether you're being asked to photograph one for the first time, there are a ton of different things to consider. So hopefully these tips will help you and help the day run the way you want it to go. Remember, if you like what you see on the Photo Show, please comment, like and subscribe in the boxes below. Let's have a look at some tips for photographing a wedding. First thing I want to say before I jump into the tips here is do not underestimate how difficult it is to photograph a wedding. There's no other photographic assignment that's going to test your skill set more than photographing a wedding will. You're going to need to be able to shoot editorial, reportage kind of shots for when you're photographing the ceremony, be able to set up and control large groups of people for the group shots and family shots, be capable enough to do portraits and couple shots in different locations around the venue you're working in, as well as looking for sort of candid shots throughout the day, and quite often lighting and working in challenging situations. If all of that hasn't put you off, let's move forward and we'll look at some tips that can help things run as smoothly as possible. The first tip I'm going to give you is preparation. There's an old saying that is, you fail to prepare and you prepare to fail. And this holds true in wedding photography as much as everything else. So one of the first things I always do is to arrange a meeting with the couple before the wedding date. So we can sit down and discuss exactly what they're looking for in their wedding photography and exactly what you're able to provide for them. So that way everyone's working towards the same end goal. You both know what you're working towards on the day of the actual wedding. The other reason for making a meeting before the wedding is that you actually get to know each other a little bit. There's nothing worse than a photographer turning up on the day of the wedding who's a complete stranger to them and just sticking a camera in their face and start snapping away. If you've met before at a pre-wedding meeting, you've got some start of a relationship there, and it makes working together on the day a lot easier. On the day itself, make sure that you've got everything ready that you need. Make sure that all your batteries are charged, make sure you've got all your memory cards, make sure you've got battery chargers with you. If you're carrying spare cameras, make sure you've got all of that. Make sure you've got any lighting with you. Chances are you're going to be driving to the wedding venue, so you can leave anything you don't need in the boot of the car. I would rather have it sitting in the car unused than suddenly realising that I need something and I've left it at home on the table. So preparing yourself for what you actually need to take with you on the day is another great tip for making the day successful. Okay, tip number 2 is don't be late. Whether you're starting off at the bride's house for the preparations or whether you're starting off at the venue, being on time or early will be invaluable to you. If you're early at the bride's house, you can spend time chatting with the family, chatting with the bride's mother, forming a relationship there that will make the day easier as it goes along. If you're starting at the venue, get there, talk to the minister or the registrar who is ever in charge of presiding over the ceremony. Find out exactly what kind of photography you can do within the venue, what you're, where they'd like you to stand, and just take the stress off of yourself. If you're starting at the bride's house, work out what time you need to leave there so that you can get to the venue before the bride arrives, because you're going to need to be there for the arrival. And you know, again, sort of, you know, if you've run an itinerary and worked out your times beforehand, this is going to work out so much better for you, and it will take the stress off. And you know, the one thing you don't want to be doing is rushing and running around. You're there for the entire day. Being somewhere 10-15 minutes early will be invaluable. So that's tip number 2, is be on time. Tip number 3 is staying ahead of the game. And what I mean by this is I've been lucky enough in the past to photograph things like royal visits. And one of the rules there is you have to stay ahead of the visiting party. Now, if you apply this rule to when you're photographing a wedding, you will always be in the right place at the right time as the action unfolds. So a classic example is when the bride arrives at the venue, you need to be outside to photograph when she's getting out of the car. You then need to be able to get yourself into the church or the venue to be at the front to photograph her coming up the aisle to begin the actual wedding ceremony. And by having a good timetable and idea of the different processes of the wedding, if you can stay 1 or 2 steps ahead of that in your mind, you'll know where you need to be and you won't miss the shots as they progress throughout the day. In addition to this, keep an eye on your batteries and memory cards. If you're running out of space on your memory card, think about changing it out if the next phase of the wedding is going to be quite long. If you're running out of space and you're about to shoot the ceremony, put another memory card in so that you know you've got enough memory card space. You're not going to have to change it halfway through the ceremony. So stay ahead of the game and try and think 2 or 3 steps ahead. Tip number 4 is about your group photographs. And what I'm going to suggest is that you take your largest group photograph first. Get everybody in to do the first photograph then you can start letting people go. There's nothing worse than trying to gather people up to be in the group photograph. It can be like herding cats. This is the point where you're going to have to be able to raise your voice and be able to get people's attention. But don't be afraid to do that. But don't be afraid to speak up. You know, you don't have to shout. You don't have to be horrible, but everyone has their different methods. But, you know, be loud enough and confident enough to get the biggest group together, photograph them first, and then you can start whittling it down to smaller and smaller groups. Bringing it down to sort of, you know, the family group, the bride's family, the groom's family. And eventually you should whittle it down to being just left with the bride and groom, who you can then take off and start doing the couples photographs. But that's tip number 4, is to start off with the largest group at the beginning. Tip number 5 is to be flexible. For all of your planning and all of the bride's planning, things do not always go the way that they should. Classic example is I was photographing a wedding in a church, and as the rings were handed over, the priest dropped the bride's wedding ring down and it went in a grate in the floor of the church. So the next 20 minutes was spent by the best man and the bridesmaids on their hands and knees searching for the bride's wedding ring. But these are the kind of things that make people's weddings unique and make them personal to them. So work with it, be flexible and be prepared for anything. At some point, a drunk uncle will think it's a great idea to do rabbit ears behind the bride. You may want to go and do your beautiful group shot or couple shot outside, and the weather turns and you can't actually, you know, do it where you want to. So you need to find alternatives. So being flexible will help you not be stressed out on the day and be able to manage, you know, issues as they arrive. The other thing is about keeping your stress levels down. If you're stressed, that's going to translate onto the bride and groom, and that's going to show in the photographs. So the calmer and more relaxed you are, the better it's going to be for everybody, and it's going to be for the photographic results. So that's tip number 5, is to be flexible and to go with the flow. So there you go. There's 5 tips that I've used over the years to just help the day go smoother and help photographing a wedding be as easy as possible. But it's by no means a simple task. So if this has been help, let me know in the comments below. If you've got any great wedding stories that you want to share, stick them in the comments below as well. For now, I'm Dave Vickers. This is The Photo Show. Thanks for watching. See you next time.